Well, it's been a minute since I have done a how-to video, so I thought I'd pull out the old soapbox and talk about how to improve at Magic the Gathering. Today we're going to be covering 5 ways you can improve at Magic the Gathering. And while I am looking at this through the lens of Magic the Gathering, this can apply to other games as well. The first way to improve is to learn the rules. Now, this may sound silly, and in many other games, it's much easier to do than with Magic, because right now Magic has a rulebook that is 290 plus pages, which is 50 more pages than the last time I checked. And trying to familiarize yourself with that rule set is, well, it's a bit difficult. And a big reason why judges exist in Magic the Gathering, because essentially it's their job to know that rulebook forward and backward, so that way they can answer your questions when something comes up. But that being said, it's fairly easy to learn the basic rules, and you can use the rulebook whenever a discrepancy comes up and you don't have a judge around to ask. There also are countless how-to guides on how to play Magic. You can go to Arena and use the Arena tutorial section and play Sparky or whatever, but it's important to learn the basic rules so that way when a question comes up, you'll have a better understanding of how to resolve it. And speaking of questions, that actually brings me to number 2, which is ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions, especially if there's a judge around. That's the whole reason they're there. But if you find yourself in a place where there aren't any judges, then go to a local game store employee if you're at a game store, or ask a knowledgeable player that might be around you. Most players will be eager to answer your questions. We do like knowing things, and we do like sharing the fact that we know things. Or you can go online, you can go to the Ask a Judge thread and ask someone there, and they'll be able to answer your rules question. There are many resources out there, and I'll put some in the description down below so that way you know where to go the next time you run into a question that you need an answer to. Asking questions is one of the best ways to improve at Magic the Gathering. While you may be asking a specific question about a specific scenario, the answer often will give you better insight to multiple scenarios. My next suggestion is for more experienced players, and that is to move out of your comfort zone. Are you used to playing control? Then play aggro for a little bit. Is mid-range your game? Well, then try control. Or do you really like the color green? Well, maybe give white a try. It's important to learn how other play styles play. And especially for competitive players, this is a great way to learn how your opponents play the game. If you always play control, but you struggle with aggro decks like red deck wins, then maybe throw together a mono red deck and play that for a little bit. It will help you learn the play patterns of an aggressive deck, so that way when you go back to playing control, you'll understand a little bit better what the opponent is thinking in certain scenarios, and then you can potentially play around those scenarios and do better against them. It helps you learn the different facets of the game and shows you parts of the game you may not have experienced before. Now, this fourth one is very specific to Magic. You can apply the previous ones to other games fairly readily, but this one's a little bit harder, and that one is draft. A couple of weeks ago, Gavin Verhey, a designer for Magic the Gathering, posted that a lot of people ask him often, how can they get better at the game? And his response was draft. It teaches you a lot. It teaches you card evaluation, deck building, and also the gameplay is very bread and butter. It's very basic. It can get complicated, especially depending on the draft format, but for the most part, it teaches you when to attack, when to play around threats. I realize I'm paraphrasing his tweet, but frankly, the tweet is what spurred this whole video idea. And then Mark Rosewater, the head designer of Magic the Gathering, retweeted it and said, "I wholeheartedly agree," or something to that effect. And I agree as well. I'm not a designer of the game, I'm just a obsessed fan, but I do agree. I have gotten a lot better as a player since I have been drafting weekly for the past couple of years. I'm much better at evaluating a card. I'm also much better at deck building. I understand the basics of the game a lot more than I used to, and I highly recommend that you try it. And I know it can be intimidating for new players. Frankly, I would suggest that a new player might hold off before they go into draft. Try sealed. Pre-release is an excellent example of that, to get a taste of limited. Wait until you understand the basic rules of the game and then get into draft. Arena is a good example of this. You can test out drafting on Arena if you like, especially if you draft against the bots. It won't necessarily teach you things like signaling and that sort of thing with draft, but it will get you used to the format. And then you can come and do it in person. And I do recommend that you do it in person if you can. That will not only give you interaction with other players and introduce you to other people who like the game and maybe introduce you to some friends, as it has for me, but it also is just you really can't replace playing draft in person. And my last point on how to improve at Magic the Gathering, or any game, is to play the game. I realize a lot of these points have that baked into them. Drafting is having you play the game. Trying different play styles is having you play the game. But really, it's important to play the game, because the more you play it, the better you'll get at it. It's practice. It's like with anything. It's like playing the piano or the guitar or sports. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And the more you do it, the more you understand what you like about it. For me personally, I like the casual side, but I also like to draft, which scratches that slightly competitive itch that I have. I don't have much of one, but draft scratches it, so it works. But I prefer casual, so I like Kitchen Table and Commander. That works for me. This is a game we all love, and I think we all should play it as much as we can. I know there are problems with the game. It's not perfect, and the company who makes it can be very frustrating, but I think the game really belongs to the community. And if you want to get better at it, I highly recommend you try some of these points. If not, try all of them, because I've done all of them and they've worked for me. Now, if you do play the game a lot, you do draft a lot, what's going to happen is you're going to have a ton of cards like this that you're gonna need to store. But if you click on this video, I review some products where you can store your collection. And that is move out of your comfort zone. Comfort zone. Today we're gonna be five. Well, it's been a minute since I have done an phenomena.